105 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So it is our first week of our new book. It is the first week of March, so we're doing a new book. Woo-hoo-hoo. And it is both of... It's a favorite of both of us, I think.
Yeah.
So we are reading Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, which is the fourth book in the Throne of Glass series. We have done the first three books, so if you have not listened to those, go back and check them out, because obviously there will be spoilers along the way. But I guess for our little convo this week, what do you think? Like, where does this book rate in your ratings of the series?
So I think we talked about it when we did the last book, Heir of Fire, that like that is when the book really picks up and starts like going. So this book, I remember reading it the first time, and the planning and the calculation and the manipulation and the like mind-blowing awareness of the main character just like blew my tiny little mind, and I was like, I didn't realize books could do this.
Yeah.
I guess whenever I read this book, I read Empire of Storms immediately afterwards. So like I kind of mix the two up in my brain. The series is so long. Like there's so many books in it that I kind of just like wasn't sure where this one ended, that one began kind of thing. But I think this book might have most of my, might be the book that has the largest quantity of my favorite scenes in this series.
Yeah.
But, like, I love the last book. I love Empire of Storms. Like, I don't know if I can really rank it, but it has so many amazing things in it. Mm. So it's high, but I can't commit to anything.
I will unashamedly say this is my favorite book in the series. Like, yeah. I think it, like, is it the most epic? No. But I just, like, there's so much character development. We really learn a lot about who, our main female character, Aelin, like, we learn so much about what type of person she is, and like all of how, like, just how amazing she is as a person. Mm-hmm. And like we learn about her like her goals and like her ideals, and it's really just, I don't know, man, it really puts her on her path, and I just love it so much. And yeah. Like it's one of those, I find that the other two books, like the next two books, Empire of Storms and Kingdom of Ash, it's a lot of them like solving problems, right? And this one is solving problems too, but I feel like this one, they're not as worried about the epic major problems of the book. They're solving some minor, lesser problems, so they're seeing more success.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just like that.
Yeah. I feel like this book really was a turning point in reading for me, that like I didn't realize you could be in somebody's head and not know what they're doing. Like there's so many scenes on a reread of this book that you're like, oh, this is when she was doing this, but she didn't tell us. She only gave us, like, I was like, but we're in her head. Like, we should know what she's doing. And like, if you've listened to our Crescent City chats, I have a really big issue with the main male character. When you're in his head, I don't trust anything, because I'm like, it's the same kind of thing with the main character in this book, is like, he's doing shit and we don't know about it in the first book.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't really realize that was a thing.
Yeah.
Until I read this book. And, like, I love it in this book because I love the main character. And I'm like, she can do no wrong. And every plan she makes is amazing. And I'm so happy. So, like, I loved it.
Anyway, can't say enough good things about Queen of Shadows. I actually, I got a friend into them, a school friend into these books a couple weeks ago. And I just told her, I was like, I cannot wait for you to get to Queen of Shadows.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot of feelings.
Me too. It like I kind of said at the beginning, it really is the beginning of, not the beginning, like, Heir of Fire is when this story becomes epic, but this one is where, like, shit goes down and things happen that you're not expecting, and there's turns and there's twists, and it's just really, really epic.
Yeah.
Big fan.
And it just makes you feel a lot of things. Like, I go from, like, to, like, this first week, I think, I'm gonna get real angry.
Well, yes. That's... Yeah, so just a warning to people, if you haven't listened to our other episodes on the Throne of Glass series, we are not Chaol stans. I always say I'm going to try to give him some grace, but I just fucking cannot. And this book is the worst of it, I think.
Yes, this makes him out to be the worst out of all the books.
Yes. So, like, we'll keep that in mind. I'll try not to be too bad. Kristen has no promises of that kind.
No. Try. You are the reasonable one in terms of Chaol in this book. Like, this
which is like, if that's the line, there is... Sorry, guys. If you like Chaol, I'm very sorry.
Yeah. Because it's... And who knows? Maybe... Listen. No, I can't even say it. I was going to say all characters deserve to be redeemed, but they don't. They just don't.
But it's the thing that I appreciate about Chaol. I can barely even say it. Is not all characters need to be good. And not all characters need to be perfect. And people can make mistakes. And I appreciate that he's not perfect. My biggest issue with Chaol, and I think we've said this 1,100,000 times throughout our doing this book series, is this is the shittiest he is, this book.
Yes.
But he doesn't ever apologize or, like, do anything to like, redeem himself in my eyes. Like, if he does later, I don't think is good enough. And that's why this book even angers me more about him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Just a warning. We will
well, there'll be some Chaol bashing.
Yes. And if that's not your jam, I apologize. But this is the warning of it. And also, just, we might talk, I guess, about Assassin's Blade. We didn't do that book, but there are things that pop up that are very intertwined. Like, there won't be any spoilers, more so than there already is in the book.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read it, it's not a huge deal, but we might just say that happened in Assassin's Blade or something. Yeah. Or, like, we got some of this in Assassin's Blade. Yes. Yeah, I think that's all of our warnings.
Yes, I think so.
So, yeah, as always, just a heads up that this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
They might. Yeah. No, they won't.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're reading Queen of Shadows. This week is week 1, so we're reading chapters 1 to 14. So, we left off with our main character, Aelin, in September. And Aelin has gone through a bit of a rebirth. She's Selena Sardathian, but we actually discovered that she is Aelin Ashriver Galvinius, the rightful heir to the throne of Terrasin. And she also found out that the king of Aderlin is hoarding wyrd keys so that he can open a wyrd gate and get an army of demons to come in and take over the world. So she's got a lot on her plate because she realizes that he has 2 of the stones. She knows where the third one is. It is actually in a family heirloom that she had when she was a child that her master, Arobin Hemel, aka King of the Assassins, took from her. So she's decided she has to go back to Rifthold in order to get it from him. On the flip side, Dorian was in love with Sorsha. At the end of the book, he witnessed her murdered. Her head got chopped off. And he was collared. So he has a valg prince currently inside of him.
Not great.
Not great. And Manon Blackbeak became wing leader. I'm just updating everybody. Manon Blackbeak became the wing leader of the witches and is currently residing in Morath with her 13 and their wyverns. And yeah, we're going to see where it all goes. The book
Chaol
does...
and Aedion, I guess, are the only 2.
Oh yeah, Aedion has been captured. Same time Sorsha was beheaded. Aedion was captured. Yeah. He's going to be put to death. Mm-hmm. And...
Chaol's on the run.
Yeah.
Meh.
Okie dokie. So, this week starts chapter 1. So we're in Dorian's head, but it doesn't say Dorian. Like, we know that it's Dorian based on what he thinks, but it never full out says his name. Okay? So it's a person, they don't remember their name, they don't remember the people they love, but they know that they're not alone in their head, and something evil and dark is prowling the barrier in his mind, and it makes it crumble a little more each day. And the only thing he remembers is pain and despair and awful screams. He remembers a red-headed woman who he loved, who had lost her head, and he keeps reliving that moment over and over again. So this is sort of our hint that we know that it's Dorian, because Sorsha had red hair, she got beheaded. He also says he remembers that the man on the glass throne ordered her to die, and he knows that he deserves this darkness because a true prince wouldn't have let her die. And he knows that soon he will not be able to fight much longer, and the thing will completely take over. So, Dorian is still in there. Which is good. So we switch over to Aelin's point of view. She is in Rifthold in what are called the vaults, which is like a seedy sort of underground bar type. There's like pit for fighting. There's prostitutes. Like, it's just like an underground bar. Mm-hmm. So she's like sitting listening to gossip, and she's trying to figure out what's happened in the months she's been gone. Because she noticed that, like, a lot of the guards are wearing black now. Like, she sees different guards that she doesn't recognize, and they're all wearing black. And she said the whole town sort of feels quieter. She had earlier gone to the Shadow Market, which is sort of like... and the reason why I'm thinking about it is because we just read Crescent City, and they have the meat market. This is the Shadow Market. It's the exact same thing. It's like you can buy contraband and shit there.
Yeah.
But you could also buy like regular things. So she buys a brick of dye to dye her hair auburn, which is like a reddish brownie color.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of our first, like, it's important, the color of her hair. The fact that she chose this color is important, and it's a layered importance. Like, it's not just for one thing.
Yeah. And it's really, it is the start of oh, we're like, oh yeah, she's just dyeing her hair
to change, to sort of blend in.
Yeah, and we're like, cool, that makes sense. But no.
Anyway, so she dyed her hair auburn because she was worried everybody would be on the lookout for her, and her blonde hair, I guess, is quite
distinctive.
Yes, striking. So she was also listening, like, at the bar. She was listening for news on Chaol as well, because she knew that if she met up with him, he could sort of give her, like, the news and tell her everything that happened.
The rundown.
Yeah. While she was there, while she was in the Shadow Market, she spotted Arabin's, who is the Assassin King, spotted one of his guys buying poison. So she followed him to the vaults to see what he was up to. And Aelin was there and had a meeting, and his cronies were all over the place. And I guess, like, it's sort of confusing because it's like at the start of her sort of talking to us in her head, sort of seems like she's trying to not be noticed, but then at the same time she did want to be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So Turn sees her, goes up to her at the bar, and tells her that Aelin wants to meet with her when he's done with his current client. And she looks at where he's meeting and sees that he's actually meeting with Chaol. And the way she describes it is the man who shattered her heart. So clearly, she's not over it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fine. She thinks back to Rowan and how much she misses him and, calls him her Karanam, and how weird it felt to be without magic after training so hard to use it. She did tell Rowan that he had to stay behind in Wendelin because he would stick out in Rifthold. So she's alone. So Chaol gets up to leave. He brought a female guard with him for protection. And the guard notices Aelin, and sort of like, I feel like, I don't know if Chaol notices her or knows that it's her, looks in her direction, and she's like, oh shit, and like, hides out at a table of people playing cards, and they're like, just because she doesn't want him to notice her.
Yeah.
But he just ignores it. I guess maybe he doesn't realize it's her, or...
I don't think he realizes it's her.
Yeah. But, like, leaves.
Yeah.
And so, like, she's thinking, why is he meeting with Aelin? That's weird. And she was also like, who's that guard? Like, because she doesn't she said there are no palace guards that are women. So she's like, wonder who that is.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes to sit over with Aelin, even though she does want to follow Chaol and, like, meet up with him. But Aelin summoned her, so she feels she has to go sit with him. She describes him as, like, handsome, and he's rich, and he's in his late 30s. They have a little back and forth of, like, they ask each other questions, and then they evade each other's answers. Like, it's like a game. Like, they don't want to give each other information.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, everything has meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way he asks something means he knows this, or he's doing this. Like, everything has a secret meaning, and I would not be able to handle it.
No. It's aggressive.
I'd get so frustrated. I'd be like, just say what you mean.
Yeah, I'm not good with this kind of shit.
No. So Aelin, he just tells her he misses her, or he missed her, and he was sad when she left. And it's the way he phrased it, it's like it was it was her choice to leave, when really he's talking about her leaving, like, as in being sent to Endovier, the slave. It's like, Yeah, sure, she chose to go to a slave camp. It's not that she was, like, arrested or anything.
Yeah.
So that, like, sort of annoys her.
For sure. Makes sense.
Right? Because it wasn't her choice. And she sort of has information that he maybe helped orchestrate it.
Yeah, she kind of talks about it in the, like, other books, that she doesn't really know how it happened, and she doesn't really want to think about it too hard, because it might mean that she was betrayed by someone she trusts.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, so she doesn't know what has happened here, because again, she hasn't had a chance to meet up with Chaol and, like, sort of debrief. So, like, Arobynn is like, oh, you don't know? And is sort of, like, teasing on the fact that he knows something she doesn't know. And it bothers her that she revealed that she doesn't know. Like, It, like, showed on her face or something like that. And it's, like, revealing any sort of emotion to him gives him, like, gives him one up on her.
Yeah.
And he tells her that... So he does tell her, like, he gives her some of the information and tells her that Aedion has been imprisoned for treason and is going to be executed in 3 days at Dorian's birthday party. And essentially this, like, screams trap. Like, it's definitely a trap.
Yeah.
For her. Because Aedion is her cousin and she wants to save him. She asks, like, why he's telling her this information, like, freely. And he tells her it's a token of good faith as a way to earn back her trust. And she has, like, a little flashback to remembering when she told him that she was leaving with Sam. Because I guess that sort of that's sort of the thing that started the whole... Like, we sort of get bits and pieces of what happened. I guess her and Sam were gonna leave and, like, explore the world together and just get out of Rifthold. And when she told Arobynn, he was angry for leaving him. And he told her he loved her. And I'm like, did he mean this romantically, fatherly? Like, I don't understand, because she is 16 at this point.
Yep.
Maybe 17, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think she kind of talks about it a bit, but their relationship is like odd, I'll say. But, like, he's trying to be all of it. Like, he's trying to be her father figure, and, like, I think he wants to be her lover too, and it's just like whatever he can do to make her not want to leave him. He's like a jealous, I don't even know, it's almost like romantic partner, but, like, she started having feelings for Sam, and he was like, gotta get rid of Sam. Like,
yeah. But it's just weird to have romantic feelings for somebody that you raised from a child.
Yes, very much so.
And, like, maybe that's the point. Like, we're supposed to see him as a villain. Like,
yeah. So
I get it. It's just, I don't know.
It's gross.
Yeah, it is gross. So, like, I just don't really, he was like, he told her he loved her so that she maybe wouldn't go off with Sam, but, and she still was like, well, I'm going anyway.
Yeah.
She also didn't necessarily believe him when he said he loved her. Mm-hmm. Like, it was almost like he was just saying that to try and get her to stick around.
To manipulate her.
Yeah. So he tells her again that he missed her. And she asks, like, if you missed me so much, why didn't you try and contact me during the few months that I was here the last time? Like, and we're talking about, like, books 1 and 2. There's no real mention of Arobynn Hamel. Like, mention of him, yes, but, like, in terms of him trying to contact Aelin, like, did not happen. And it's just a super fair question.
Yeah.
So he thought it was because she would kill him on sight. So he didn't bother. And I'm like, how is that different now?
Yeah.
Like, why is it changed?
It doesn't really make sense.
Anyway, I guess he says that he's offering his resources to help her rescue Aedion. And she asks, like, what's the catch? And he says he wants a favor. Of course he does. And he says there are creatures in men's skin prowling his city, and he wants to know what they are. We know they're valg, and he wants her to capture one for him to study. So, like, in all fairness, not the worst request.
No.
Like, I get it. So she actually does give him some of the information. She tells him part truths about the valg. She obviously leaves out everything about the wyrd keys and all that jazz because she doesn't want him being like, maybe I should take over the world.
Well, yeah, or to realize that he has one.
Yeah, that too. So, yeah, she tells him that the king managed to stifle magic and uses these demons as hosts for people to bulk out his army, and that people who use magic are better hosts for the demon. And she does explain the rings and the collars and how to kill them. Says they have to, she says fire works and beheading works. And she was like, but so far that's really it.
Yeah.
So, again, she sort of tells him the truth, but she leaves out some things. She tells him that she will get a valg for him, but only after he helps her with Aedion. Because if not, she's worried that if she gets him the valg first, he'll just pull out.
Yeah, for
of the agreement. So they have this, like, intimate moment where he, like, kisses her cheek and whispers in her ear, like, asking how he can atone, what he can do to be forgiven, and care for her as he used to. And, like, all she has to do is this one favor, and he'll lay the world at her feet. So, like, it's creepy as fuck.
It is.
But, I mean, not much we can do about it. So, she's, like, about to refuse, but he tells her to think about it. And he was like, if you're looking for someone, all you have to do is check the southwest section of the tunnels tonight. Insinuating that she wants to find Chaol. And then he suggests that because she's changed in 2 years, he could as well. So he's trying to make it seem...
You're a grown-ass man.
I know. He's like, oh, you've changed. Can't I change? And it's like, she changed because she's growing up, because she was a child.
Yeah.
And now she is not... She's not a girl, not yet a woman.
Yeah, it's true.
It's my Britney reference.
I love it.
So yeah, he's grown. I don't see myself changing a whole lot anytime soon, so I can't imagine he will. Anyway, so Arabin and his men leave. And she just thinks to herself after how disgusted she is by him. But she can't act disgusted in front of him. And she's like, he is such a liar. And she's just thinking, like, how much revenge she has to get before going back to Terrasen.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So, like, yes, revenge. I love a revenge plot.
Me too. And I love that this is, like, she needs to play along and she knows that she's playing along. Like, we do get this little bit that she is disgusted by him, which I appreciate.
Yeah. So, she reveals to us at this point, like, that she actually laid a trail for she didn't tell us how, but she laid a trail for, like, those soldiers in black from the docks to follow her. And she was like, they're about to find her at the bar. And 4 of them burst in, and Aelin just, like, gets to work, as she calls it. I'm assuming that all the soldiers in black are, like, valg.
Yeah, I think it does come up that they all have rings. Like, they're not, like, princes. They just
Yeah.
have lesser valg inside of them, I guess.
Fun. So then we skip over to Aedion's point of view. So he is in the dungeon, and he knows he's going to die soon. He's either going to be executed or by an infection that he has brewing in a wound on his side. And this part is actually really sad, because he knows his execution is a trap for Aelin. So he has actually kept the wound and the infection hidden from the guards so that they wouldn't try and heal him. And he sort of discusses that he wants to die so that he can't be used to incriminate her. And he is getting worse by the hour. So he says he only hopes that he can die fast enough, and calls it like his last push to serve his queen. It's so sad. He's such a good, like, loyal subject.
He just loves her so much, and he hasn't seen her in so long, but still loves her. And both of them, like, it's a theme throughout the book of, like, both of them not feeling like they're enough. And I'm like, you're both enough. Feel it.
Well, they've both had to do so much, like, to stay alive, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess that feeling of shame of having to, like, go along with the people that killed your family just to sort of stay alive is hard.
Oh, definitely. And I do understand it. It just makes me sad.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Go back to Aelin's point of view now. She is running through the alleys, and she's being chased by 20 soldiers.
NBD.
Yeah. But I think these are, like, regular ones. They're not all valgy ones. Mm-hmm. So the 4 that have found her trail and followed her into the vaults, she killed them all. And she said that they had just been touched by Wyrdstone. She didn't see rings or collars on them, but they had, like, an otherness coming off of them. And she actually thinks to herself that she used the fight as an excuse to completely destroy the vault itself.
Love it.
And it's hilarious, because Arabin actually owns shares in it, and he made a ton of money off of it, like, for the fights and the prostitutes, along with other nobility in the town. So, as she was fighting, she just destroyed the whole thing and then killed the owner accidentally. Apparently, he, like, ran into her sword. So, it's just a blow to his, like, pocketbook, to his wallet.
And then he ran into my knife.
Yes.
Is it, like, 10 times or something?
Yeah.
Love it.
So now she's running through the alleyway, and the 20 guys following her, she was like, they're a lot faster than she thought. She even, like, ran through someone's house and, like, broke through a door and went up to the roof. And then she shimmied down a drain pipe and ran into the sewers before they could see her go into the sewers. And so she follows them for a little bit until she finds the section that Arabin told her about. And she talks, so she's trying to find Chaol at this point, and she thinks about how much she hates the sewers. She was apparently held captive down there by a bodyguard who was mad that she tried to kill his master. And she got loose from her bonds and had to swim through, like, the gross sewer water, aka pee and poop. And, like, could have drowned because she reached a section where she thought she could escape, but there was, like, a locked grate in the way, and Sam actually managed to, like, find her and free her before she died. So
yeah, and this is a flashback of it, but also this story is in Assassin's Blade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyway, so ever since then, she has had, I guess, trauma related to the sewers. And for somebody who has trauma related to the sewers, she goes down there a whole lot in this book.
Yep.
She, like, lives in them sewers.
She has to get over it real quick.
Yeah. So she's, like, debating, she, like, reaches a fork in the thing, and she's trying to figure out where to go. when the female guard that was with Chaol actually sneaks up behind her and calls her champion. So she knows, quote unquote, who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And offers, like, says, like, follow me and you'll get your answers. So when I say, quote unquote, who she is, she knows that she's Selena Sardothian, the king's champion, but does not know that she's Aelin, Ashriver Galthinius.
Yeah. And that is a thing that we will have to talk about for every person that she talks to in this book.
Yes, yeah. So they travel down some tunnels, and the female, we still don't know her name, makes to, like, climb out and shows Aelin her back to, like, get ready to climb. So Aelin takes this opportunity to take a knife and hold it to her throat. And she was like, I don't want to wait for answers. I want answers now. And she's like, what's, like, going on with Chaol? And the woman tells her that Chaol abandoned his position at the castle and joined the rebel cause 3 weeks ago. So the woman tells her that Chaol abandoned his position and joined the rebel cause. And she also tells her that the prince is still at the castle and alive. So Aelin is like, okay, and puts her knife away, which then causes the other female to hold a knife on Aelin because she doesn't trust her because she hid from Chaol at the vaults. Like, I guess this woman saw Aelin's, like, trying to hide herself from Chaol. So she's like, why would you do that?
I feel like she saw her at the vaults, and then when she sees her now, she's like, oh, that was you at the vaults. Like, I don't think that she put together that it was Selena at the vault.
Maybe not.
But I don't know. That's just
she said that she seemed like she noticed her.
Mm-hmm.
She also says, like, she's remembering, like, last winter, you slaughtered my friends. They're my rebel friends. Because Chaol was kidnapped in,
Crown of Midnight.
Yep. Chaol was kidnapped in Crown of Midnight, and she went wild and just went into the warehouse and, like, killed a shit ton of people.
Murdered everyone.
Yep. And Aelin's like, so I shouldn't have killed the people that had my best friend assassinated and threatened to kill and beat up another friend of mine, aka Chaol, but she's calling him a friend, not her lover, boyfriend, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman sort of didn't have a response to that, and she's sort of like, yeah, I guess you have a point.
Well, like, if you're gonna trust Chaol, like, I don't know. Did he just not tell her at all about Selena? He was like, make your own decisions. Like, was she in the warehouse, I wonder? I kind of feel like she wasn't a thought in SJM's mind in Crown of Midnight.
Probably not. Anyway, so she just says, like, we've arrived, and they're still, like, in the sewer, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And, she turns to see Chaol and some other guy, and they're carrying a guy in between them. And they're headed in the direction of the docks. I don't understand how you know directions when you're in a sewer.
I guess she knows. She's just that good. I wouldn't know.
I guess. Me neither.
Know anything.
Then behind Chaol and this other guy, there's two other rebel guys carrying someone else in between them. Chaol sort of approaches her and asks if she is hurt, and she says no. And she thinks of him and their relationship, and she notices his scar that she gave him. So she doesn't begrudge his decision anymore. So the decision she's talking about is the one where he didn't tell her about the threats on Nehemiah's life. He kept that from her because he was trying to demonstrate that he was more loyal to his king and his crown than he was to this assassin woman that he had just met. Like, he was trying to prove that he did love her, but he still could do his job. So he kept it from her. And she never forgave him for that because Nehemia died, and she felt like she could have helped.
Mm-hmm.
So, she doesn't begrudge him that decision anymore, but she knows that it did break their relationship, and while she said she doesn't begrudge him for it, she can't forget it, and she can't forgive him.
Fair.
And completely fair, right? If someone has, has a hand in your friend's death, even though, like, we found out that she sort of orchestrated it, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah.
It's like that whole thing in Hunger Games with Gale and Katniss. Yeah. Right? Like, exactly. Gale didn't kill her sister, but his idea orchestrated it. Mm-hmm. So she can't separate those two things, so they could have never been together. Yeah. So Chaol sort of dismisses the female and says, like, you need to maintain your cover, go back to work or whatever. And he calls her Nesrin, so we finally have her name. Do you say Nesrin or Nesrin?
I've just said Nesrin.
Okay. He also calls her Nesrin. He calls her last name Philique. Philique is her last name. So, and we get a little bit that she's from the southern continent. Mm-hmm. Chaol tells Aelin about the injured people that they're carrying. They are former magic users, and they are held down here in the tunnels before they're executed, because they want somewhere private for the valg to torture them. And Aelin sort of, I guess she knows more about who the valg are than Chaol does. Because she's like, I don't want you coming in here anymore. It's too dangerous. And he says, like, me and the rebels were the only ones that can, because we're humans with no magic. So they're ignored a lot. And he actually reveals that he sent Ren north, or like not that long ago, because of the potential magic in his bloodline. So Ren is somebody that she grew up with, was a child of Terrasin. We met him in Crown of Midnight, him and his grandfather. She almost killed him. Aelin did. Yeah. But then they sort of... She didn't know who he was at that time. Yeah. But yeah. So she remembers him, and she's like, oh my god, he's alive. Another child of Terrasin made it. And there's sort of a lot unsaid between them. Mm-hmm. Like, she wants to apologize for everything, but she doesn't at the same time, because she literally is blaming him for the quote-unquote abyss she's been wallowing in and had to fight out of these past few months. She blames him for being so broken at the beginning of Heir of Fire. And, like, this is going to be my one time where I defend Chaol a little bit. While I think that he had a hand in breaking her, I don't think he's responsible for the whole thing. I think she had a lot of unresolved guilt and conflict within her over what happened to her as a child that obviously he had nothing to do with. And I think it was just this final act that sort of broke her. But I think a lot of it was there anyway. Like, I don't think he's wholly responsible for putting her in that pit.
Yeah, I agree completely. I feel like she also has a bit of guilt now over having healed herself without him. Like, it's kind of... She's like, I left him, I am healed. But it's also so dumb. I hate that he's the one that sent her away. And now, like, she didn't ask to go there. She didn't ask to be, like, any of that shit to happen to her. It's his fault that she went. So I'm still annoyed at him.
Yeah. He sort of doesn't make any move towards her to, like, hug or kiss her. So she interprets that as, like, he obviously doesn't have feelings for her anymore. And she sort of is like, well, now that he knows she's a fae, and he hates magic. He obviously doesn't have feelings anymore. Like, the feelings are gone.
Which we kind of saw at the end of Crown of Midnight, because he, like, wouldn't comfort her after, or, like, help. He wasn't... We were in Dorian's point of view, and she had just shifted back, and Dorian had just woken up, and he was like, why isn't Chaol helping her? She can't get up. Like, she's injured. And Chaol was like, no way.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's very prejudiced against Faye.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just another reason to dislike him.
Yep.
So he does tell her, though, that he managed to get Fleetfoot out of the castle. Thank God.
Yeah, happy about that.
We love Fleetfoot. Side note, so it's really funny. So somebody posted in one of the, like, book groups that I'm in about them reading this series. And they said that, I feel like they said that, like, Dorian might have just given Fleetfoot as a present to Aelin. So, like, they're in book 1.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, I need you to tell me if Fleetfoot lives through the whole thing, because I literally cannot read when I can't read something knowing that the animal is going to die. Like, just exceptionally empathetic to animal death. Like,
yeah, but also, like, if you're worried about it the whole book, are you going to be paying attention to anything else?
Yeah. So, was like, I really need somebody to, like, tell me whether or not to continue this book, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, it was, if Fleetfoot dies, I can't read it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought that was like, aww.
Yeah.
I love the puppy.
Such a good baby.
Yeah. So he says he got Fleetfoot out of the castle, and she's actually living in Nesrin's father's country home. So he's, like, a super successful baker, has, like, several bakeries in Rifthold. So has enough money to have a country home, which is wild for, like, a regular person. We also learn here that Nesrin is actually a city guard, not a palace guard, which is why Aelin didn't recognize her. Mm-hmm. And she is very trustworthy, considering he's known her for 3 weeks. Like, he's known her for more than that, but, like, known her as a rebel for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
She asks what happened, and he tells her, like, I have to deal with this injured person and getting them on a boat right now, so, like, meet me later and I'll tell you everything. So he goes off and, like, goes up to the streets and takes the guy to the docks. Instead of meeting him later, she just follows him.
Of course.
Because why not? And when he's finished putting the injured people on the boat, she, like, makes herself known. And he's like, of course you couldn't, like, meet me later. So he tells her the story of everything that happened. And she is not impressed with his behavior of working with Aedion. Like, she thinks that he was careless. Mm-hmm. And she's really sad about Sorsha, and, like, feels for Dorian, because I guess she experienced the same thing. And she thought that Chaol should have gotten Dorian and Sorsha out of the castle after the king, like, killed everybody in Endovir and Calcula.
Yeah.
But she thought that he was trying to get out of everything with his honor intact. Like, she thought that his actions were trying to just be him trying to get out unscathed. So
it's also, I think we talked about it a lot last book. Like, he was trying to do both. Like, he didn't want to pick a side. He wanted to be on the king's good side, and he wanted the rebels to help him so he could protect Dorian, but he wasn't picking a side.
Yeah. Which, you gotta pick a side, man.
Yeah.
So she's, like, furious with him, about that, obviously, but she doesn't want to say anything, because she sees that he's sort of upset.
Yeah, like, he knows he fucked up.
Yeah. She sees that, like, he's sad. right? So he's just sort of like, she's like, oh, I guess I won't say anything.
Yeah, and, like, it's also one of those instances, like, she could say whatever, but it's not going to change what happened. He already feels super shitty about it. Like, it's not going to do anything for her to be like, what the fuck? But that's what she's thinking.
Yes. So she asked what he's learned about Dorian since he fled. And I love that she used that word. And she loves that she used that word. Like, she used the word on purpose.
Yes.
As an intentional, like, nudge at him.
Yeah.
Right? And she sees that, like, shame flashes in his eyes. And it shows that, like, he knows he did the wrong thing, leaving Dorian behind. And Aelin, like, thinks he's a coward for leaving Dorian behind. And she doesn't understand how he could have served the monster of a king.
Yeah.
And, like, it's not that, like, he's kept all of his movements hidden. He's kept some of them hidden, sure. But, like, outlawing magic, like, conquering other nations, like, killing and slaughtering, like, other nationalities of people. Having
Dovir in general, yeah.
Like, having slave camps, like work camps, like, all of those things are monstrosities. So, like, how is it you could have knowingly pledged yourself to that kind of a person? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so, like, her opinion of him has really changed from the first couple of books. And rightfully so.
Yeah.
Like, have a brain, dude.
Yep.
Anyway, so he then tells her that he has a couple of guards still in the palace that are loyal to him, and they're reporting on Dorian's movements, like, to prove that he's still safe. Apparently he hasn't been punished at all and is still attending events and parties like normal. But they report that he's been colder and distant. And Aelin's like, have they noticed him wearing a black ring? And he says no. But then he said, but someone saw him wearing a black stone necklace. And Aelin is furious all over again and thinks that she might rip his face off if he, like, tries to come near her. And I'm like, yes, do it. So he then asks her for her story. And she tells him everything about her childhood, about what happened in Wendelin. But she didn't say anything about the Callers, because she doesn't want to hurt him by telling him that Dorian is now being infested by a valg prince. And she doesn't tell him about the third word key. Because she, you know, like, why would she? Has nothing to do with him. But she does say that she wants / needs the amulet of Orinth that Erebin is in possession of. And he asks if she's alone. Like, did she come alone? And she's like, yeah. She said, Rowan couldn't come. And he's mad at her that she's alone. She was like, he thinks that he sent her away and was hoping she would, like, raise an army by asking Maeve and the Ashrivers. And he tells her she didn't try hard enough. Because she was like, did you not hear what I just told you about Maeve? Like, obviously I couldn't.
She wasn't gonna help.
Yeah, and he was like, you didn't try hard enough.
I just, like, he sent her away originally to stay gone. He didn't send her away to find an army. He sent her away
did not.
So that she would not be in danger there anymore. He sent her away and didn't expect her to ever return. And now he's like, where's the army? And she's here being like, oh, he clearly feels bad about doing the wrong thing. I don't want to rub his face in it. And now he's like, what the fuck? You didn't do enough. And she's like, your one goal the entire time I've known you was to not fuck over Dorian, and you fucked him over. So good job failing at everything. But she doesn't say that. I would.
Yep. Anyway. Point is, Chaol's an ass.
Yes.
But then he makes it worse. He blames her for everything happening right now. Everything is her fault. He says that she was so blatant and obvious in her defeat of Narok, which was in Wendelin when they, like, attacked and they had that big fight at the end. And she used her power and it was awesome. It pushed the king to do what he did in the throne room that day, aka beheading Sorsha and putting the collar on Dorian.
And, like, what the fuck was she supposed to do? She almost died. There was no other way for her to, like, she couldn't have done anything differently.
But, like, not only her, like, all those people at the keep would have died.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry. They're fae. So, according to Chaol, maybe they deserve to die.
Yeah, he's just so... I get that I don't even get that he's annoyed. All I can think is he's annoyed that she doesn't need him anymore, and that she is strong now on her own. And that's why I don't understand why he refuses to understand her situation just because his situation is bad at the moment. He's like, nope, everything's your fault.
Anyway, it's one of the first of many things that Chaol says that is god-awful.
Yeah, and I think, like, the first time I read this book, I was fine with him before this point. I was like, oh, he made a few bad mistakes, whatever. And then you meet him again, and this felt like whiplash. Until I read it again, and I was like, oh, he had traits of being a shitty person before. But this time, this book, when I read it, I was like, what the fuck is going on? It seemed so out of left field the first time I read it, because I was like, why is he being such a dick to her? He sent her away to protect her. And now that he realized who she was, he's like, you're what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
Not the king, you.
And, like, you would think that would be enough. Like, hey, you didn't get an army, everything is your fault. But then it gets even worse. Because she tells him, it's not my fault, it's the king's fault. But, like, she's like, obviously he wants to blame her for something.
Yeah. And
then he sort of, like, lets it slip that he knows how magic was lost. Like, how the king did that. And we did find out in Airfire, they found out how the king did it.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, tell me so that I can bring magic back. But he refuses to tell her because in his mind, magic will create more chaos and make things worse.
Yeah.
Like, he's being a dick.
Yeah. And it's mostly like, he's like, well, there's no checks on her and her power. If magic comes back, she could do whatever she wants. Fuck you. You loved her. You wanted to marry her. And now you're being this?
And have babies with her. So she's, like, so mad at him right now for him being a dick that she tells him what the collar around Dorian's neck means. And, like, she's like, so are you going to dismiss everything I've done now? She's like, so you'll see why I had to do what I had to do. And instead of him being like, oh, I get it, he is mad. And he's like, well, why didn't you warn us?
Which, like, so I don't know how he expected her to do that. I do think, like, she didn't even think about it. And she's like, oh, shit, I should have at least tried. Which is fair. But I don't really understand how messages work in this world. Because, like, it took her 3 weeks to get back. How is a message going to get back faster? And, like, in the last book, Chaol and Aedion and the grandfather, whose name I forget. I don't know his name. And the guy who you just said who has the double swords. Ren Alsbrook and his grandfather have a talk, and they're like, something is happening at, like, the piratey place, and we should warn Wendelin. And they're like, we can't get anything to them in time, though. And they're just like, cool, that's all we could do. But now, when it's her, she should have done more. And you're like, it happened so fast afterwards that, like, she wouldn't have been able to get a warning to them in time. But I do, like, she should have still tried. So I will, like, I think he's obviously going about, like, he's being an idiot. But I do think she should have tried to send a warning. But, like, that doesn't change anything.
I also feel like maybe even she didn't anticipate the king using it on his own child. Like, when she left, like, I feel like maybe she saw how the king of Aderlin was playing it out in the world. I feel like her big thing was maybe she didn't realize that things were going on back in Rifthold. You know what I mean? Like, she came back and sort of thought it would be the same.
Yeah.
And when she had left, those Wyrdstone collars weren't a thing. The rings weren't a thing. Like, he wasn't so... But not as obviously a thing.
She knew, though, because, like, in the first book, What's-His-Face, Cain had one. So, like, she knew that... And then, like, Roland got one. So, like, she knew that anybody that had magic could. But, yes, she didn't think that he was actually going to do it to his son.
But also, like, it wasn't as implemented in the king's palace as it is now. Right? She comes back, and all these soldiers and, like, these, like, commanders, like, there's, like, a whole new force of, like, valgy soldiers.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like maybe she didn't anticipate him using this technology in Rifthold itself.
Yeah. It's just, it also makes me wonder, like, where did all these people with suppressed power come from? That they're all able to get the rings and have the valg and whatever. Because, like, in the first book, it was like, and the second, whatever, before now, like, we found Kaltain, and you're like, she has power, and then they found Roland, like, he has power in his family line, but, like, where did the king find all these people? My question.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, so she just sort of has to, like, she sort of tries to push it aside, like, their argument, and says, like, we have to free Aedion and Dorian. But Chaol's like, there's no we anymore. So he doesn't want to work with her. And doesn't really want to associate with her. And he thinks that magic is dangerous. Even though it saved his life on multiple occasions.
Yeah, and Dorian has it.
Yep, and Dorian has it. But he worries about who is going to keep the quote-unquote monsters in check and stop them if they grow too strong. Mm-hmm. And Aelin asks... So, like, Aelin just takes the blow that essentially he's calling her a monster.
Yeah.
And then she asks why he can come to terms with Dorian's power, but not hers. And he says it's because Dorian didn't kill Archer Flynn, or kill Graves and cut him up into pieces, or kill dozens of people at Endovier. Because when she made her, like, great escape, she killed a whole bunch of the guards. And she just told him to get his head out of his ass. Even though his words, like, devastated her and she walked away.
Yeah.
And, like, that's a really shitty thing to say to someone. She literally just bared her heart for you and told you everything about her childhood. And how, like, what we've learned about how, like, she was 8 years old and, like slept in a bed of her parents' blood. That wouldn't make you a little bit sympathetic to someone. Instead, you're literally putting every single thing that is wrong in the world at her feet. Like, it's
clearly the king. Like, I don't understand.
It's mind-blowing how much of a dick he is.
Yeah, it 100% is.
And, like, everyone's saying, oh, you know, he's got his own stuff going on. Like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
I don't care. There's no reason, like, that's, like,
yeah. I also just didn't understand why he had to be such a dick here. Like, I was like, why is this a thing? Why is he this much of a dick? Why?
Yeah. I just can't. I just can't. And if you think that's it, it's not. It's not it. Because then we go to his point of view, which I'm super stoked about, obviously. And he's in his room thinking about Aelin and how she's a queen now and she acts like a queen. And apparently he noticed the blood on her clothes when they had their meeting and how nonchalant she was about the fact that she killed people earlier. And how he's been a fool not to be disgusted at how she spills blood so easily. And I literally wrote at this part that he's a piece of shit and I hate him so much. Like, she literally killed a whole bunch of valg and he's like, oh, she killed people. Like, has he not been doing the same thing?
Yeah, like, he's so hypocritical in this book and it breaks my little brain.
Anyway, so he thinks then of her story and how she encircled Maeve's city of Dornell in fire and made a Fae queen scared. So she probably shouldn't have that much power. And he's not going to tell her how to free magic until he's sure she's not going to do the same thing to Rifthold. And I'm just like, do you honestly think she is going to do that to innocent people living in a city?
Or, like actually harm them? Because, like, his point is the people living in Wendelin were innocent. Like, she did encircle the entire place in fire, and she could have killed a whole bunch of innocent people, but it was to stronghold Maeve into doing something. Because the whole point, like, the last book, Maeve was like, my city's stone, and she was like, your people aren't. Like, I hope she didn't use that wording to Chaol, because, like...
I'm just really angry. Like, it's almost like he learned she was Fae and forgot the type of person she was.
Yeah, but that happened in the last book, and in the second book. Like, he forgot that she was an assassin in the first and second book, and was like, I can't believe you're killing people. And then she was like, I'm actually not killing them. I can't believe you're not doing what the king said. Like, he's...
Yeah.
Dumb.
He's a fucking hypocrite.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nesrin comes to his room, and Chaol, like, sort of admits in his head, aka giving us the information, that right before he went to get Aelin from Endovier, he actually spent the summer sleeping with Nesrin.
Was very,
and when he went,
no strings attached, friends with benefits.
Very, very, like, just sleeping together, not a relationship. And when he went to Endovier, he didn't tell her he was going, and then when he came back, they just didn't have sex again.
Yeah.
And he then tells Nesrin about Aelin and, like, who she actually is. Like, that Selena is Aelin. And then tells her about Dorian. So he thinks that he's now thinking back, like, maybe he should have told Aelin about magic. And Nesrin, yeah. It's like he just had this whole thing of, I'm not telling her, meh. And now he's like, maybe I should have told her, meh. And he actually says it out loud to Nesrin, and she's like, yeah, you probably should have. Especially now that we know that Dorian is likely gone. Like, Nesrin is very, like, go with the flow.
She's very practical, and she's like...
Yeah.
Yeah. I like her a lot.
I do, too. So she's like, Dorian is likely gone, so we need to think about other options, because Chaol's whole thing is, I'm not going to stop until I see Dorian on the throne.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, if Dorian's gone, who else are we going to put on the throne? Fair. And she then tells him that Aelin killed a ton of the king's guards and ruined the vault. And Chaol just says, yeah, she does what she wants when she wants, and she probably has an ulterior motive for it.
And she does have an ulterior motive.
Sure, she does. But, like, I don't understand how this is bad.
Yeah. Me neither.
Like, the vaults are shitty.
Yeah.
The king's guards are shitty. You're killing them anyway in the sewers.
Yeah. But it's not okay that she's doing it.
It's not okay when she does it. It's only okay when he does it. Anyway, he remembers something that Dorian said to him in book 2, I think. He says, you cannot choose. You cannot pick and choose. You do not get to pick and choose which parts of her to love.
Yeah.
I will scream it from the rooftops. It is one of my favorite quotes in this whole book.
Yeah.
Or in the whole series.
Yeah. And it's true for everybody. It's not just him and her. In all of life, you do not get to pick which parts of anybody you love.
Yeah.
It's like, and Dorian saying it was like
I know.
Like, chef's kiss. Good job, Dorian. You are...
Well, because who else is he going to listen to?
Yeah. But, like, it's like... Dorian kind of annoyed me in the second book when he was hung up on Selena. And Selena. I was like, ugh. But it was the first moment that I was like, he could be a king.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so we go back to Aelin's point of view. She's back at her apartment. It's the one that she bought once she paid off her debts to Erebin. So, her and Sam actually lived here for a few weeks before he died, and she remembers that while Sam was being tortured by Rourke Farron, she was actually packing up their stuff because they were leaving to go to the southern continent. So she remembers that while he was being tortured, she was packing, and I feel like she might feel a bit of guilt for that.
Yeah.
And Erebin actually came to tell her Sam had died. She grabbed a clock off her mantle and threw it and, like, shattered it. But she noticed that, obviously, the mess of the clock was gone. And all of the books she had packed to take to the southern continent were back on her shelves. And she knew, because at first she was like, oh, the clock is all cleaned up. So she didn't know if that had been Erebin or if that could have been maybe like the rebels because I think Ren stayed there for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then she noticed that all the books were put back. Her clothes were put back. So she knew then that it had probably been Erebin because the books were put back in the order she would have put them back in. Like, she has stuff in a specific order. And Erebin's the only one who would have known that. So she gets in the bath and she thinks about Chaol and how selfish it was that he had run away. And she was, like, sort of reflecting on him calling her a monster and thought, like, maybe she was a monster, but for her friends and family, she would be the monster and, like, debase, degrade, and ruin herself. And she also knew that she would have never left Dorian alone.
Yeah.
Like, even if he told her to go, she would have chosen to die with him. Same way that her and Rowan had stayed together to fight the valg.
Yeah.
And she thought that she was very naive for falling for Chaol. Like, she was a naive girl. And it's very true. Mm-hmm. And not questioning him on why he served the true monster.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we said that a lot when we read the book. We were like, this is, like, obviously doomed. And, like, the moment that she was like, you'll always be my enemy, she, I think, finally realized that it was doomed. So, like,
yeah.
We're like, yay, finally. God.
Yeah. She forgave herself for falling for Chaol in the first place. Because I feel like maybe she was starting to feel guilty. Like, ugh, I can't believe I was with him. What was wrong with me?
Which is
fair.
Common.
But feeling. Then, she forgives herself because she says she thinks that she needed that stability after everything she went through. Mm-hmm. But now, she was her own champion. And she's refusing to ink another person's name on her skin. So early the next morning, she writes to Erebin and accepts his offer. one valg demon for the rescue and safe return of Aedion.
Yeah. So we actually pop on over to Manon's point of view now, and it's our first time with her this book. And she and half of the Iron Teeth Legion have been in Morath for a few weeks. So I guess, like everybody else, 3 weeks have passed. At the end of the last book, she became wing leader, and she took half of the Legion to Morath, while the other half stayed with her grandmother, the matron, and they're just basically all waiting for orders and shit. So she's currently in a meeting with Duke Parrington, who we met in book 1, and she does not trust him. So Astrid, her second, and Sorrel, her third, are in the room with her, and Vesta and Lynn are outside the door, and they're all part of the same clan, which is called the 13. Manon kind of thinks like the Duke only bothers with her to give her orders on her legion. Otherwise, he's focused on the army of strange-smelling men and whatever she can hear screaming in the catacombs. So, like, we don't really know what is going on, but it's, like, strange-smelling men makes you think of they probably have valg in them.
And then, too, on top of that, like, she really thought this would be a position of, like, authority and power. Mm-hmm. And she's not getting, I think, the, like, cooperation, I want to say. Like, he's not including her on decision-making sort of like they thought he would.
And, like, he doesn't respect her and, like, her status over him as he's human. Like, like, so she really should, like, she is his predator. So being treated like this by somebody who is your prey is not in her nature to be okay with. Mm-hmm. But the screaming in the catacombs makes me think of, like, creating people like General Narok, like, or like the guy that was under the library in the second book. Yeah. So Manon kind of thinks, like, she doesn't actually care about any of that. But her shadows did tell her, and her shadows are 2 of her 13. Is it Vesta and Lynn that are her shadows? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
I can't remember their names. But they're twins, and they dye their hair black, and they sneak around. But they have told her that there are altars and blood down in the catacombs. So, like, there's some shit going on down there. During this meeting, Kaltain is in the room with everybody. And this is the first time we've seen Kaltain since book 2, I think. We just heard that...
2 or 1? 2.
2. You're right, 2. Yeah. She was in the dungeons, and then she was taken to Morath to become Duke Parrington's wife. And she was scared. And she felt a little bit like she was going mad because she could hear wings and all this shit. So, like, there's a lot going on with Kaltain. And she is wearing a collar. So that's unfortunate. We know what that means, but Manon doesn't really. She just makes a note that she's wearing a collar. And the, like, whatever the collar is made of, Manon is wary about it and kind of stays away from her because of it. But Kaltain is silent and seems like she's on an invisible chain between her and the Duke. And he is always, like, touching her as he speaks, and she's covered in bruises. And there's a new 2-inch thick scar on her arm that he's, like, touching all the time now. Which is gross. It's like a brand new scar. Ew.
So yeah, I guess the insinuation is that she's obviously being abused.
Yes. But she's also, like, we know that there's a valg in her because of the collar. So that's why she's cooperating and silent and whatever around Parrington, and he has control over her. Because, like, I guess with the rings, like, the king had control over Cain, blah, 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 all that stuff. So, like, it's very sad. One thing I will say about this book, which I kind of will probably get into it a bunch, but, like, I feel like in the first few books, it was very much like Aelin wasn't like other girls, and she didn't have girlfriends, and like that kind of stuff, and like she was catty and bitchy to girls, but it was fine because she's our main character. And I do feel like in this book, Sarah J Maas does like correct that and like girls empower girls thing, and I love it. I'm very happy that it happened, and it like we'll end up getting into that a bunch, I think, throughout this book. Anyway, back to why Manon is in this meeting. Parrington tells her that he wants her to report on the wild men of the Fang. He wants to know their settlements and numbers, and that they are not allowed to engage with the men or kill any of them or have sex. And she's like, this is a rule that they've been stifled with for like 3 weeks, which is unbearable for them. Because like, that is what they do. So she just agrees because that's what she's supposed to do. And he cuts her off and says that she needs to address him as my grace. And she's just like, no, you are not my grace. Like, I'm not addressing you like that. He just laughs and he wonders if she'll seize his prize. But she says she has no use for human lands. She just wants the western wastes. I don't think she says that part out loud. But she does tell him that she has no use for human lands. So, like, he is kind of afraid of her and her power, but he's also super dismissive of her, so it's, you know. Mm-hmm. So, they end up leaving, and Astrid is by her side, and they walk past the Duke's private rooms, and the guards there are, like, non-reactive, even though, like, they are predators, and most people are afraid of them. So they're, like, they're abnormal and they don't seem like humans anymore. Manon tells Vesta and Lynn to gather the others because they're going to go for a hunt. And Manon and Astrid go to the towers where they stay and where their wyverns stay with them. Astrid asks Manon why they shouldn't just leave. They aren't being used or ordered to do anything here. That they should just, like, go live somewhere else until they're needed, basically. But obviously Manon shuts it down because, like, that's not what her grandmother told her to do. That's not what she's been ordered to do by her grandmother, which is, like, the be-all, end-all. Yeah. And she also tells Astrid not to speak like this in front of other people. Like, it's very much, her mother is where the orders come from, and then it's her, and then her 13 aren't allowed to talk back to her. And that's, like, kind of a common theme in these few chapters with Manon. Astrid says, like, she would never talk about Manon badly to any of the other clans or anything. Like, that's not something she would do. But Manon is, like, not used to her talking back at all. So she threatens to demote her and tells her to keep in line. So the 13 are showing up in the room as they're having this conversation. And Astrid says her will is Manon's, but her tone is off. So Manon, like, grabs her throat with her nails and threatens her. And she says that she'll kill her when she isn't useful anymore. So, like, there's a lot of tension between the two of them at the moment. Mm-hmm. The 13 end up getting on their wyverns, and they have to make, like, I don't really understand what this place is, but they're in a tower, but they have to make a really big drop before they can start flying, which is, like, the whole point of learning to fly in the last book. But I just don't really understand what this place is. Like, it seems like there's, like, a dome. It's not. I know it's not, but it seems like, are they, like, underground with stuff around them? I just don't understand why they need to make a drop. I can't picture this place.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't get it. But anyway, that's what they have to do, so that's what they do. Manon says that, or thinks that, like, Abraxas likes to just tumble off the edge like he was just shot dead, and obviously she doesn't say shot, but he likes to tumble off and pretend that he's, like, got no control. And I love him. He's so cute. Mm-hmm. So they fly for a bit, and then they go to a place with water that Manon has seen before, but they've never explored. And she watches Astrid as she's like untethered, joy is radiating from her, and she's like riding her mount, and she whoops, and Manon thinks she would be punished for letting this flourish in Astrid, but also she appreciates it, and she likes that Astrid can feel that way, but she knows like if her grandmother was around, they'd be punished. They end up finding a farm with sheep, and they are going to feast and amuse themselves. So obviously the wyverns are going to eat the sheep. And we also get like this 13 refuse to eat children. So they do have a respect for human children, but other clans do not have the same whatever rules. But they do have that rule, which is nice of them. Thanks for not eating human children. Mm-hmm. So we go to Aelin's point of view now, and she sent Arobynn her agreement, and then she went out to get food, and when she got back, there's a box in her house, but like there's no sign of entry. So somebody broke in very easily and left this box, and she's like, of course he did. But it has her suit, which we've heard about in Assassin's Blade. And there's a note that says that he had some improvements, and she should go out and play with it. So she actually hasn't seen the suit since she was captured, but it was a gift for her from Arobynn in Assassin's Blade. And right now it's also like, this is a test. Her wearing the suit is kind of a test. He gave her the suit for free, we'll say, as a like apology, but he also had one made for Sam and then was like, now you have to pay for it. So, you know, he's a piece of shit. She thinks like she will do anything, and I think you almost just said this, but she'll do anything to save Aedion. She's fine with being Arobynn's protege, fine with being Selena Sardathian again, and she will do whatever she needs to do. So she starts putting on the suit, and she notices like it's reinforced everywhere she needs it, and it like just reiterates that Arobynn knows her weaknesses, like her knee that twinges a bit, there's extra support there. So like he knows all of her weaknesses, which is scary. She hears a carriage outside then, and she goes outside and sees beautiful Lysandra at her door. And I think the only time we've heard of Lysandra was in Assassin's Blade. So read that for more information. But there's also a child with her, and Lysandra says she's there to warn Aelin, but Aelin says, like, the last time she saw her, she promised she'd kill her the next time she sees her. So, like, this is brazen of Lysandra to show up at her house. We get a tiny bit of their history. She's known Lysandra for 9 years, and they were always, like, pitted against each other, and basically became enemies. But Arobynn found them both around the same time, I guess, but gave Lysandra to Clarisse, who we heard about in book 2. She's the Madame and was Archer's mistress as well. So, like, she owns the brothel and sells the brothelers.
Sells the prostitutes.
Yes.
Well, I can't say she sells them. She loans them out.
Yes. And then it's very much like Clarisse and Arobynn do things the same way. They, like, you pay for it. Like, you're just in debt the entire time you're there. Like we saw with Archer, like he was close to paying off his debts apparently. So Clarisse trained Lysandra, and Aelin was trained obviously in a different way, but like her life very much could have been changed with Lysandra. Like it's sad.
Yeah, she sees it as like if Arobynn had decided to also give her to Clarisse, then she could be exactly what Lysandra is right now.
Yeah.
And Lysandra is no better. Not no better, but like she's sort of like considered a slave almost. Yeah. Like she has a tattoo on her arm that, like, shows that her life is, she's like an indentured servant, essentially. And she's just paying off her debts through sex.
So, they could have easily been in different situations, but, like, Aelin spent her life being pitted against Lysandra, so she doesn't have any, like, sympathy or empathy for her, because they antagonized each other their whole lives and been fighting for Erebin's attention, so, like, it's his fault. He's a piece of shit. So, when Aelin bought her freedom from Erebin, he used all of the money that she gave him, which was a shit ton of money, to buy Lysandra's virginity. So, it was just a slap in the face to her, she felt, that he just used all, like, her entire life's money. And she took it out on Lysandra, even though it's really Erebin, but, you know, that's how it goes. Anyway, so back to the present. Aelin says she should kill the driver and make sure that her prodigy keeps quiet. And the driver's just like, please don't. But she goes over and just, like, says his name and where he lives. And she's like, if you say anything about this place or me, I will come back and kill you. So, like, he's gonna keep quiet.
Way to go, girl.
Aelin kind of assumes that the kid is there as, like, a shield so that she doesn't kill Lysandra. But Lysandra just asks to talk with her for a few minutes. And she said she does agree. And she, like, gets the child to come out of the carriage. And she notices that the kid is super beautiful, but she has scars on her cheeks. And she actually has a branded out tattoo on her wrist, which is like you said, anybody that is indentured has that tattoo. But to have it branded out means that you're no longer in service. So generally that would mean that you have paid off your debts. But this is a kid, so that is odd. Anyway, the three of them go upstairs, and Aelin offers the girl a seat and then her choice of a book or a pastry. And she's just, like, really nice to this girl, which I appreciate. She's just a child, so. Yeah. Lysandra tells Aelin that she was sent by Erebin to tell her the plan, because he doesn't trust anybody else, really, to tell her, but that she came to give her a warning herself. Aelin doesn't really believe that, but obviously she needs to know what the plan is. We also get a moment of, like, she sees that Lysandra still has her tattoo, and she kind of wonders, A, why Lysandra hasn't been able to pay off her debt in the 2 years since she's been gone, because she, like, made a shit ton of money when her virginity was sold. So, like, it's odd that she's still indebted. And also...
Yeah. It should have been enough to pay off her debts. But, like, so my question is, so, like, the Mrs. So Clarice got Lysandra around 8 or 9 years old. So what does she do with them for those, like, 7 or 8 years before she's allowed to auction off their virginity?
It's training.
I guess. It just seems like if your virginity is so highly sought after that you can pay off your debts after one transaction.
Yeah.
Then how would she keep people in her employ?
I feel like Lysandra was a special case because she's so beautiful, but I also think, like, she wouldn't have paid it off after the one time. Like, I think it was, like, she should have had it paid off by now in the 2 years after, but I think, like, it would have taken a few times, but it's hard to know. But yeah, she also wonders, like, Nehemia warned her about Archer by using this tattoo, so she wonders if it was a warning against everybody that works for Clarice, or if it was just against Archer himself. So she's kind of like, there's two things that this tattoo is bringing up for her. Right. So Lysandra just, like, asks her what her issue is with the tattoo, and she responds that Archer had one, and Lysandra's just like, oh, he's dead. And Aelin's like, yeah, I killed him. Lysandra's a bit surprised, but she just says that that's good because he was self-serving. Lysandra then tells Aelin the plan, Arobyn's giant plan, and Aelin actually thinks it's brilliant, but we don't get any of what the plan is, which I kind of love and I kind of hate it. I'm like, I want to know more, but also I do like the surprise and like turns everything takes. Lysandra says like she knows that she's dead if she betrays Aelin, and she thinks Arobyn actually sent her here to test Aelin's loyalty. Like I think what she says is he told her to go to see like what Aelin's thinking and see what she's doing, but she also thinks that he sent her as a present if Aelin did want to kill her. Lysandra even says like Evangeline knows what to do if Lysandra does end up dead, so like she isn't trying to use this kid as a shield. She's just like, if you want to kill me, go ahead. She then tells Aelin that she actually wanted to come to warn her that if she can get out of this with Arobyn, that she should. Like, he can't be trusted, and he's going to turn against her. And Aelin kind of already knew that.
As if Aelin doesn't know that.
Lysandra also gives her a letter from Wesley. And Wesley was Arobyn's, like, main guard, personal guard. And he ended up killing Rourke Farren, and Arobyn killed him. So he killed Rourke Farren in revenge for Aelin. It's kind of what it's like, Sam and Aelin. It's kind of what it seemed like, but we didn't have confirmation. So Aelin is just like, what the fuck? Why do you have a letter from somebody who died 2 years ago? And it's like not opened. It's for Aelin. Well, sorry. This is another thing here is that Lysandra obviously doesn't know she's Aelin. She thinks that she's Selena. Just put that out there. Because I actually forgot about that for a little while. But yeah. So she asks why Lysandra has kept this letter for 2 years. And Lysandra says it's because she loved Wesley. So that's a turn we didn't really see coming. And it's obviously sad. She tells Aelin that the letter explains everything, and it says, like, Wesley wrote down what Arobyn asked Farren to do to Sam. So, like, she kind of suspected that Arobyn was behind all of this, but she thought that Farren, like, chose what to do to Sam on his own. Like, she didn't realize that Arobyn went that far. So, yeah. It's, gross. And it also says, like, what he had planned for her, and we're obviously assuming going to Endovir. And Lysandra says, like, if Wesley didn't die, he would have gone to Endovir to try to save her, and, like, he even went to, I think, the Shadow Market and bought a map of Endovir to try to get her out. Lysandra then kind of...
Which is... I will say that I think that that's nice, because she literally thought everybody just abandoned her there. So it's nice for her to know that somebody cared enough to plan to go and rescue her. And
it seems like a nice man. Which is sad, because he's been dead for 2 years now. Lysandra tells her then that, like, Wesley used to bring her home after her appointments with Arobyn, and, like, she was always, like, sad afterwards, and they ended up...
Well, yeah, because she was being raped.
Obviously. So they ended up, like, developing a friendship, and then they fell in love. Aelin is kind of pissed, specifically about the fact that Arobyn, like, about Lysandra saying that Arobyn asked Farren to do those things to Sam. So, like, that pisses her off. So she ends up forcing Lysandra out. And then Evangeline, the kid, goes to follow Lysandra, but she stops and tells Aelin that the scars on her face are actually because of Lysandra. So Evangeline's mother sold her to Clarice, and she was given to Lysandra to, like, help fit in and learn the ropes and shit. And Evangeline said she couldn't do it. Like, she was so devastated and worried about everything. Obviously, like you would be. She's a fucking small child. But Lysandra told her that she could help, but it would hurt. And she gave her the scars. So after that, everybody thought that Lysandra did it because she was jealous. And Clarice beat the ever-loving shit out of her. And ended up adding Evangeline's suspected profits to Lysandra's tab. So that's why she's actually still there. Like, she now has to pay off an entirely another person. And, like, as Evangeline is growing, she's adding more and more debt. Because Clarice is like, look, she's so beautiful. She would have got even more. So, it's real shitty.
And obviously, Lysandra's worth probably is decreasing as she ages, and, you know, like, her V card was like that one huge lump sum. I doubt she even gets like a 10th of that price for just like a regular appointment.
So, but we kind of needed to know why she was still there, so that is why. Aelin thinks then, like, if she can change in 2 years, maybe Lysandra did too, and maybe, like, she could give her some grace in this situation, because she's like, clearly she didn't want another child to grow up in this, and, like, she took this all on herself. So she's like, and then she actually thinks that, like, maybe if her and Nehemia had given Kaltain a chance and not written her off as a vapid courtier, like, their lives could have been different there too. So, like, that's what I mean. And like, I feel like Sarah J Maas was kind of like, I went a bit too far in the catty girl against girl thing.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. So Aelin goes after Lysandra and Evangeline. We jump over to Aedion's point of view, and he is gonna die soon. Like, the infection is going strong, and he is feeling bad. But the crown prince shows up, and Aedion sees that he has a collar around his throat and a blank expression on his face. And Aedion tries to talk to him, but he realizes pretty easily that he isn't looking at the prince anymore. Like, it's not Dorian anymore. So he actually starts thinking, like, if a ring could take over a soul, like, what can a collar do? So, interesting. I didn't really know that the rings, like, I thought the rings put, like, a lesser valg in you or something, but I guess...
That's what I thought,
so I don't know. Maybe it's just because he doesn't know about the valg, and that's what he's like, sure. Anyway, so the collars are bad. So he tries to talk to Dorian, and he brings up, like, what happened in the throne room, and he brings up Sorsha, and he kind of sees something flicker in Dorian's eyes, but, like, there's no reaction, and there's just coldness and denial. So he can kind of see that, like, he thinks Dorian is still in there, but, like, it's not great. So as the prince leaves, he actually tells the guards that Aedion is dying of an infection, and Amity comes and saves him. And Aedion's just like, fuck. Because this was his plan to keep Aelin away. So now he's, like, basically healed of that, which is not good. We go over to Dorian's point of view again, and like you said earlier, like, it doesn't say that it's Dorian's head. He doesn't know who he is. But he's just thinking, like, the thing inside of his body steers him like a ship. And they go up to the man's throne. And, like, he doesn't know that this person is his father anymore. He doesn't know that this person is the king anymore. It's just, like, he knows nothing about himself. The man tells them to bow, and Dorian tries to refuse, but he can't stop his body from moving. And the man can actually tell, and the man being the king can actually tell that they're both still in there fighting. So he asks about Aedion, and against Dorian's will, the thing inside of him just tells the king everything. And the king just laughs and says Aedion must be scared Aelin is gonna come if he was trying to die on them. So, like, yeah, he was. He then says he should have done this ages ago to Dorian. And you're like, ugh, the king's a piece of shit.
I mean, like, the king is obviously a piece of shit, but he's not wrong, like, to help his own cause. Like, why did he leave his son, like, as an independent, like, person for so long anyway?
I completely agree. Like, it doesn't make sense for his narrative, but also, we're glad he did.
Oh, yes. Like, obviously I love Dorian. I don't want anything to have happened to him. But, like, for the king's point of view, it was pretty dumb to leave him, like, sort of untethered,
exactly.
if you will.
Yeah, completely agree. We go to Chaol's point of view now, and he's actually at the shadow market. And like you said, it's basically like a black market, flea market. And it's in the sewers. And Chaol thinks it...
I don't think it's in the sewers. I do think there's like an indoor warehouse because of what happens in the future.
I thought it was underground in some way because it floods often during the rains.
Maybe, but they also talk about how, like, in the future, they, like, close everybody in and burn it to the ground, and then some people try and escape through the sewers, and there are guards waiting for them to slaughter them all.
I just don't, because, like, during the wet seasons, I guess, wherever this place is, it overflows with water, and they can't use it. So it's only during the... Right. And, like, maybe that's just because it's in a shitty place that overflows with water. I just assumed it was kind of like undergroundy, but I don't really know. But Chaol thinks like the shadow market is allegedly built on the bones of the god of truth to keep people there honest. But then he's just like, the god doesn't exist though. And he also thinks like this is the place that the king torched first once he was getting rid of magic. Like you said, he boxed everyone in, lit the place on fire. So Chaol and Nesrin are there, and they're going to meet Brolo and Ress, who obviously Ress is a guard that stood for Selena's room a lot of times, and Brolo is the like weapons master, the whatever. Yeah,
the guy who trained them, right?
So we've met them before, but they're basically at a stand, and they're trying to be like, Chaol and Nesrin are trying to be inconspicuous and like stopping at other stalls on the way, and they're like, I don't know, it's just kind of silly. But they go up to their stall and like pretend to barter and like hold up their fingers for like amounts of money or whatever. But Brolo gives Chaol plans for the party, which is obviously Dorian's birthday party when they're going to be killing Aedion. While they're chatting, Aelin actually cuts in about there being a sale on knives. And, like, they're surprised that she's there, obviously, because Brolo and Ress know her as Selena, and she was gone. And she's still supposed to be killing, what's-his-face? Her cousin.
The Ash Shriver, yeah.
But they... I guess the 5 of them or whatever are there, and Brolo actually asks her to pull her hood back, and she does, and he asks if she's going to save Aedion, and she says yes. And obviously in this moment, Brolo either had suspicions or whatever, but he just confirmed to himself that she's actually Aelin. Like, is kind of what we're getting.
Yeah.
Chaol, like, sees the way she's acting, and he thinks like she is a queen and she is ready to slit throats, and it kind of surprises him, and you're like, why? But anyway, I can't get into that. Brolo then asks her what she needs, and Chaol cuts in to say that she can't endanger them, but she says it isn't Chaol's call, obviously, but she actually ends up telling Brolo not to let his men be stationed near the southern wall of the garden, and that anybody who is like on,
sympathetic,
with Brullo basically, should wear a red flower. And Chaol's just like, oh shit, she's actually helping. Like, he didn't expect this at all. He's like, she's helping here. She isn't demanding that they do something. He's almost like, oh, she kind of deserves some thanks for that. But then he's also like, she didn't mention her plan for Dorian, so she's a piece of shit. You're like, what? The whiplash here. But anyway.
Ugh, I hate him so much.
We go to Aelin's point of view now, and someone is trailing her after she made a few purchases at the market, but she ends up just going to the royal bank of Aderlin. And she talks to the master in his office about her accounts, and he goes to get her money, and she looks at his desk, and there are files of important clients in the room, like her files, and whatever. Sure.
It's just a little tidbit there for us to chew on
for a while. So it becomes important. So anyway, she ends up leaving, and she, like you said, she isn't going to catch a valg before saving Aedion, but she is going to start to do a little bit of hunting. So that's, I guess, what she does. And then, I guess, the next day, she wakes up, and she reaches for Rowan, but he isn't there. And she thinks to herself the reason she didn't want him to come is because she didn't want him to be a crutch. So that's why she left him. And I'm like, fuck right off. He can be a crutch. Like, you need help. This is the dumbest plan ever.
I know. She doesn't want to rely on
which is
anybody.
Not possible. Anyway, she ends up being called to the Assassin's Keep as well. So we go over to Manon's point of view, and she also gets a summons. And she was about to go on a solo ride with Abraxos, so she is annoyed. And, like, it always seems to be that it's happening at these times when she's, like, she doesn't get any time to herself, and she's just pissed. Astrid comes to tell her that she was summoned, and she's like, I already know, fuck off. And all she can kind of think in her head is that she's not a dog to be summoned by these humans, by these mortals. Like, she's just so pissed, but she has to keep her temper in. And she ends up obviously going, and she meets with the Duke and Lord Vernon Lochan. Interesting. New person. She asks what they want, because she says she needs to hunt, and they ask if the food isn't good enough for her, and she says that she doesn't touch mortal food. And, like, we kind of got this in the last book, I think, of, like, they're worried of what's in the food, because it smells off, and the people smell off, so she's like, they don't eat the food here. The Duke then says that they should have chosen the yellow leg heir instead of her. And she's just like, fuck off. But he also tells her that he needs her to choose a clan of witches to experiment on. And he says they're looking to the future, and he wants a Blackbeak clan to see if they can be bred with the valg. And she's like, what the fuck? But he says, it's like, there will be no sex. It's just a stone that'll be sewn into their bellies. And she's like, why don't you just use humans? Like, what is going on? But he says that the witches have valg blood already, so it needs to be a witch's clan. She obviously doesn't like that, and she says that they're an army, not his whores. And she wonders if her grandmother knows about this, because she's like, this is insane. He says they need to do this, or he'll make dog meat out of her mount and her 13's mounts. And she says, like, if he touches Abraxos, she'll flay him. But he just, like, dismisses her and tells her that the blacksmith wants to talk to her. You're like, fuck. Astrid tells Manon that she can't give up a clan. And, like, we kind of get a bit about how, like, witchlings, witch babies are sacred. And, like, all witchlings and female pregnant witches are, like, protected very heavily until the children become 16. They're basically sacred. Manon also thinks, like, there's no greater pride than bearing a witch child and no greater shame than to lose one. That's just a tidbit of foreshadowing.
It is a tidbit, yes.
Astrid asks her who she's going to choose, but she says she's not sure. And, like, Manon is kind of thinking to herself, like, she needs to talk to her grandmother about this. Like, she doesn't really know what to do because she obviously doesn't want to give a clan up. Astrid pushes and she's like, are you going to force a clan to do this? And Manon is just like, ends up slicing her in the chest and tells her that she's replacing her with Sorrel and that Astrid is now her third. And then she's just tells her to go tell the others now. And, like, is just done talking with her. And you could kind of tell this was going to happen. There were threats about it, but, like, it's still sad. Astrid...
Yeah, it's just this thing of, like, Manon needs to have an appearance of keeping control, and Astrid just keeps pushing it and, like, just keeps questioning her on decisions, and she really doesn't have the right to do that.
Yeah. And it's very much, like, the only person Manon is really allowed to ask advice from is her grandmother. Like, she shouldn't need anybody else. Like, she is the next in line after her grandmother. Yeah. So she, like, you're not supposed to need people. Yeah. So Astrid basically leaves then, and Manon walks into her room where she smells a human. And there's a servant in her room cleaning, and Manon kind of talks to her, and she responds with, like, a too perfect stammer. And Manon sees that she has, like, a chain between her feet, and one of her ankles is mangled and, like, permanently on its side, and there's a bunch of scar tissue. So, like, Manon actually asks her what happened, and she says that she fell down the stairs when she was 8, and her uncle didn't trust healers, so she wasn't able to have her ankle healed, and the chains are there so that she can't run. We also get that her name is Aelin. She's from Peranth, and her uncle is actually Lord Vernon, who was there earlier. So this makes Manon suspicious that she could be a spy for Vernon, and she ends up, like, going over to Aelin and, like... I feel like it's usually, like, sexual when they do that, but, like, puts her finger under her chin to, like, tip her head up and look into her eyes and, like, basically threaten her. But she ends up cutting her chin with her iron nail, obviously. And she actually, like, tastes the blood, and she has to physically keep her face blank so that she doesn't react as Aelin rushes out of the door. And you're like, interesting. We don't have to wait long to figure out why. But she can smell that Aelin was, like, by the maps and looking around. And she does wonder, like, is she a spy for Vernon or for herself? And she knows she needs to keep an eye on her since she has witch's blood, which is interesting. So it's still red, but there's some witch's blood in her family line.
Right. Yeah.
Manon goes to the blacksmith now with Sorrel, who is her new second, and their mounts do not like each other. Because I think they're both males, so, like, they don't get along as well as Astrid and Manon's mounts get along. Right. So Manon is looking at the swords that are there that were made for them, but she tells the blacksmith that they need to be lighter. And he's just like, he can't speak because they actually cut out his tongue, and she's like, she assumes it's so that he can't tell people, like, what he's doing here. So he points to the decoration, and he's basically like, they'll need to go, to make it lighter, you need to get rid of anything decorative. And she's just like, she doesn't care about that. She doesn't care about how pretty the swords are. Like, the wyverns will be carrying enough stuff. They need the swords to be very light. So he leaves to go get something, and Sorrel brings up Astrid. And says, like, Astrid is on edge here. And Sorrel says, without her grandmother here to instill fear, they're all restless. And Manon says, like, her grandmother would punish them all. And Sorrel says Astrid understands that better than most. Just another little tidbit. We go over to Aelin's point of view now, and she is at the Assassin's Keep to meet with Arobynn, and she goes into his study, and she kind of just, like, glances at the rug, and he's like, yeah, I had to buy a new one. I couldn't get the blood out of the old one. And, like, it's literally from beating the shit out of her on it that he had to get rid of it. So we're like, cool, you're a piece of shit.
Yes.
Every conversation with him is just painful. Because they're both...
It's just like you have to think so hard.
I don't want to think. But he basically, like, needles her, and she realizes that he's kind of wondering if she's caught, if she'll sell him out. But she's like, I won't. Like, I've done this before. Like, I'm strong enough. Like, I'll be able to hold if I'm being tortured, kind of thing. He then asks if she's doing this as Selena, or basically as Aelin, and what she's going to tell Aedion. And she says she's going to tell him the truth. And he also asks why she hasn't brought him a valg. But she says she won't do it until Aedion is safe. And he's kind of surprised by that, but, like, she literally told him that earlier. Yeah.
Told him that in the beginning, yeah.
I read it early. I obviously read it in your part, but I kind of forgot about it. Because she says it now, and he's like, what? And you're like, obviously, she said it before, and also, she doesn't trust you. He also asks why she didn't kill Lysandra yet, and he had sent her as a present, and she says, like, she didn't care enough about her to kill her, which, like, obviously, not what happened, but...
Yeah. Yeah, because she literally, the last time her and Lysandra saw each other, she threw a dagger at her head and was like, next time I see you, I'm gonna kill you. And so Arobynn was like, here you're seeing her again. Are you gonna kill her?
And he kind of says, like, I thought you kept your promises. So it's like, and she's like, oh, I just didn't care enough to kill her. Like, it's been 2 years. Fuck it. He then tells her that she better keep her end of the deal, or he will show her that he owns this city. So you're like, it's threatening that he'll get her captured and her cousin captured.
But also, what happened to the do this one favor for me and I'll throw the world at your feet? Yeah. Like, what can I do to atone? Like, he has switched gears real fast.
She actually says almost word for word what you just said. And he's like, he's just like, you know, this is the real us. Like, if you want me to do that stuff, I will. But, you know. Anyway, he's just a piece of shit. I hate him. But he actually asks her about the prince then. And he asks if she'll do the right thing and kill him. And what the captain would think of that. And he kind of insinuates that the captain doesn't share his secrets with her, but he does with his former lover, Nezrin. And he also says that Nezrin's father is providing tarts for the prince's party. But the former lover part really rattles Aelin, which is kind of funny here. Because she obviously didn't know that.
But I don't understand. She's over it. So, like...
Yeah.
I don't know why she's rattled.
I feel like she thought that he didn't move. He was pissed at her for moving on, and now he's apparently moved on too. Like, they're both wrong. So it's annoying, but
yeah.
Communication. Ugh. Arobynn then asks if she wants to know why Chaol went to see him, and she says that she's the one that sent Chaol to see him. And you're like, we all know that's not true, but they can't give each other anything. And he also tells her, like, everything is good to go, and she says she expects nothing less. On the way home, Aelin drops into the bank again. Period. When she gets home, Lysandra is there with some food. And Lysandra actually tells her that someone is watching her, but she already knows it's Chaol. Like, he and his men are following her around and checking up on her. And she's like, I know that. I don't care. Lysandra asks her if she read the letter, and Aelin did, and she says she memorized everything, but she had to burn it. And she does apologize to Lysandra because, like, obviously she had kept this because she loved Wesley, and she probably was hoping she could keep it.
Yeah.
But yeah. She then tells Lysandra that she asked her to come so that they could talk about her. And Lysandra asks when they get to talk about Aelin and why she's saving Aedion. And this was the moment when I was reading, I was like, oh yeah, she doesn't know who she is. It like actually clicked again. So
yeah,
she's Selena with Lysandra. But obviously Aelin says, like, Aedion's more useful to her alive than dead. And, like, we're just leaving it at that. Lysandra tells Aelin then that she used to be so jealous of her. Like, Lysandra was just a pawn for Arobynn to use against Selena, but that attention was better than nothing. So, yeah. Like, it's sad. Like, they both had a sad upbringing, but Lysandra's kind of opening up. She also tells Aelin that, like, Arobynn called her the night that Selena was captured and obviously raped her. And, like, on her way home in the carriage, that's, like, she broke down and cried because, like, Selena was gone. She was friends with Sam. Like, pretty good friends. Like, Sam was her only real friend.
Yeah.
So she was really upset about that, too. And that's when things with her and Wesley actually changed. And they realized they were in love with each other, I guess. Lysandra then tells her that she wants to destroy Arobynn and has actually, like, thought about stabbing him in his sleep multiple times. And she asks if destroying the vaults was for Sam. And, like, I kind of love it. I love it because it was.
Yeah, and I love that she's picking up on it.
Yeah, me too. I love their developing friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Lysandra tells her, like, she didn't want to kill Arobynn before now because it wasn't just her revenge. And she loved Wesley as much as Selena loved Sam. And Aelin thinks in this moment that she loved Sam more than she ever loved anyone in her life, even Chaol.
Yeah.
I just think that's so important. And it's also obviously devastating, but she thinks too that, like, when she came back the first night she was here, like, she slept in Sam's shirt, and, like, she still misses him, and it's just really sad. But it kind of right-sizes her relationship with Chaol, I think, which I appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Aelin actually apologizes for being so nasty to Lysandra before, and Lysandra just says, like, they were young and stupid, and they are allies and friends now, and they're both, like, kind of starved for female companionship, so they end up, like, joking around about, like, how their friendship's gonna be and about eating so much chocolate until they puke. And Lysandra calls them wild beasts in human skin, and I love it. I love it.
It means a lot of things.
It does. And Aelin thinks to herself that Lysandra wouldn't balk at her other form, and, like, she would probably appreciate it. And I'm like, yeah, because she's not like Chaol.
She's not a bitch like Chaol is.
Lysandra asks if everything is good to go for tomorrow, and Aelin says it is, and then Lysandra says that she should kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and Aelin is like, what do you mean? And then we don't get any more information on that. But something's gonna happen, I guess. We jump over to Chaol's point of view now, and they are at an executioner's block, and Nezrin is aiming to try to kill the valg so that they can save people, and Aelin is there too. And Chaol tells her not to touch Dorian tomorrow, and she says killing him would be a mercy. And he tells her if she kills him, he will make sure the executioners find Aedion. Aelin then tells Chaol if he brings her court into this, she will burn him and his kingdom to ash. And he kind of realizes that he went too far in that moment. And
you think?
And Aelin is, like, really pissed, we'll say. Nesrin kind of cuts in and says, like, they aren't enemies and they have an issue at hand. Like, she can't make the shot, so she's like, we need to do something else. Aelin asks her then if she's a good shot, and she says she wants Nesrin on the wall tomorrow to, like, help her out, basically, during this whole debacle that'll happen. And Chaol just says no, and Aelin says he's not her keeper. And it just annoys me so much that Chaol keeps saying no for everybody when Aelin asks them something. It's like, fuck off. You're like, just back off. But he realizes in that moment that Aelin knows about his past with Nesrin, and she doesn't care. And you're like, she cared earlier, and now she... This is the communication issue. But I don't care enough that they have a communication issue because I don't care about him. So... No. Basically, the executioners don't wait until 6, which is what they normally do, and they end up chopping a man's head off, and people applaud. And Chaol thinks to himself that this city might deserve her flames, and he might too. And then he tells her to take out the clock tower, and magic will be free. And she says, thanks, obviously, and he says, it's for Dorian, not her. And you're like... Why? Why do you have to say that? But also, he's right. They all deserve it. Even him. I do appreciate that he actually thinks that. Like, cool, you're a person.
But it just annoys me because, like, he thinks, oh, maybe I went too far, or like, oh, maybe I, like, shouldn't have said that, or oh, maybe I did this wrong, or blah, blah, blah. And again, from what you said earlier at the very beginning, he never bothers to apologize.
And, like, I think...
Like, he says some really asshole things to her. He calls her a monster, tells her everything was her fault, and not once does he apologize for it.
And he just said that he would get, like, if she kills Dorian, to save him, because he is in a shit ton of, like, pain now, and, like, there's something else in his body. If she does the right thing and kills him, he's going to choose vengeance. Like, that's ridiculous. But also, like... Yeah. You said earlier, the first time they were talking, afterwards he was like, shit, I probably should have told her how to get rid of magic. Like, he has these moments of, like, shit, oh, that wasn't the right thing. But they're only in his head, and it really pisses me off. And, like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough to feel a tiny bit bad, and then do nothing to make it better. Yeah.
Atone.
I hate it.
Yeah.
So he tells her, obviously, the king expects her, and she actually realizes that she didn't take into account that the king might use word marks against her, and, like, he could actually key them to her name or Aedion, and, like, get them, like, going through a doorway. She could get stuck in the doorway, kind of like they did with the monster in book 2, her and Dorian. So she's, like...
In the library?
So she's like, shit, I wish, like, I had those books from before. And Chaol's like, I actually have them, I'll give them to you. And you're like, oh, good. He's being useful for once. Yeah. Aelin ends up going to a different rooftop, and as they're going to kill the second man, Aelin ends up throwing her dagger at the executioner, and then all hell breaks loose. Chaol storms the platform. Nesrin is shooting arrows. Aelin is shooting. He grabs the 2 men, and he brings them to the docks. Nesrin ends up finding him there, and he tells her to be careful tomorrow. And she's kind of done with him. She's, like, a bit over his bullshit, it seems like. Because she's like, ever since Aelin's been back, he's been very... dickish. Too.
To everybody.
And, like, I think earlier he was like, well, you don't have any suitors lining up down the road or anything. And now she's like, oh, I'm going to go tell the family first guy that he has died. And he's like, you don't have to do that. And she's like, I do. I need to, like, keep in check, like, what is possible. What can, like, I'm a city guard too. Yeah. It's also my job. And she's like, you know, remember, there's not a line of suitors waiting for me. So she kind of, like, pushes it back in his face, which I appreciate. But, like,
yeah,
he's really being a dick.
I don't understand why she, like, because I guess in the future she does have, like, some feels. And I don't understand, because he's not nice to her.
And, like, he never was, but it was fine, because in the beginning it never meant anything. Like, the sex didn't really mean anything to her either. So, like, it's surprising that, like, yeah. Anyway, so we go over to Aelin's point of view now, and she's watching the guards. And, like, this whole thing was because she wanted to see what the guards would do during chaos, because that's what's going to happen tomorrow after the party. And she also wanted to see, like, how good Nezrin is. So that's why she orchestrated seeing them. So she's watching the guards now, and there are a bunch of soldiers nearby, all wearing rings and moving jerkedly. So she ends up jumping down from, like, I guess she's on a rooftop watching them. So she jumps down and just kills a shit ton of them. And she cuts their heads off, and they stay dead. So she's like, cool, I know that I don't need fire to kill them, I can just take their heads off. So, like, it's also, she was making sure she could actually kill them before tomorrow. That whole night, she goes over the book The Walking Dead and other books that Chaol gave to her, and she memorizes all of the word marks that she might need in the morning. And then the next day, she dresses in the costume that Arobin sent her, and she goes to save her cousin. Dun dun dun!
Dun dun dun!
And that is our cliffhanger for this week, which I love it. I love it. Big fan.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll see why we have strong issues with Chaol in this book. He's just, like, being a dick. And I can't, like, I can't really forgive it. I'm not a forgiving person, though, so that's probably part of the problem. And if I can't forgive real people, how can I forgive characters? Anyway.
But the rest of the book we love. Even if we don't love Chaol.
So I guess we're going to wrap it up for this week. So if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or you can check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Coffee and Co-Read, and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week, we're going to be reading the second part, which is chapters 15 to 29. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.